Ethan placed the coffee cup in front of me, his fingers lingering on the rim for just a second too long. Steam curled upward, carrying a scent that made my stomach tighten, bitter, almost metallic. Something was off. "I made this just for you, Evelyn. Go on, taste it." His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, carefully measured like a rehearsed performance. I looked up, meeting the eyes of the man I had been married to for 3 years. His smile was warm, affectionate even. But that was the problem. It was too perfect. Too deliberate. Across the table, Victoria, my sister-in-law, stirred her coffee with lazy indifference. She looked effortlessly elegant, as always, in a tailored silk blouse, her dark hair swept into an immaculate bun. But it was her eyes that unsettled me. Amusement flickered behind them, like she was in on some private joke I wasn't supposed to understand. "Ethan's been practicing different brewing methods lately," she mused, lifting her cup to her lips but not drinking. "Just for you." There it was. The emphasis. For you. A statement wrapped in honey, hiding something far more dangerous beneath. I glanced down at my cup again, the scent creeping into my lungs. It wasn't just coffee. There was something else. Something foreign. The last time I had a drink at Victoria's house, I ended up in urgent care for the night. A mysterious allergic reaction, they called it. The same way they had called the other incidents food poisoning, a bad stomach virus, an unfortunate coincidence. Except coincidences didn't happen this often. I forced a smile, lifting the cup just enough to bring it near my lips. Ethan and Victoria both watched me. Waiting. I didn't take a sip. Instead, I turned my wrist slightly, pretending to examine the coffee as I studied them through the rising steam. Ethan looked calm. Too calm. His hands were resting on the table, but his right thumb was tapping rhythmically against the wood, nervous energy betraying the mask he wore. Victoria, on the other hand, was unreadable. Poised, detached, but her fingers remained curled around her untouched cup. Something was wrong. And I wasn't about to be their fool. I let the cup hover near my lips, tilting it just enough to give the illusion that I was about to take a sip. The bitter scent lingered, filling my nostrils, making my stomach twist tighter. They were waiting for me to drink. I lowered the cup with a thoughtful hum. "It smells different." Ethan's smile twitched. "It's a new blend. Something special." Special. I fought the urge to laugh. Special, indeed. "You always get creative with your coffee, don't you?" I mused, swirling the liquid slightly, watching the dark ripples dance along the ceramic edges. Victoria smirked, leaning back in her chair. "He really does. It's admirable how much effort he puts in, especially for you." There it was again. For you. Like a quiet warning dressed as a compliment. I glanced toward the window, my reflection barely visible against the city skyline beyond. The afternoon sunlight glowed against the pristine white marble countertops, the glass dining table perfectly set, everything in Victoria's penthouse was pristine, controlled, just like her. My fingers tightened slightly around the handle of the cup. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. For the past year, my life had been littered with accidents. Small things, easy to dismiss. A slightly spoiled dish that only made me sick. A drink that tasted off, followed by an unexplained fever. A stomach bug that no one else in the house caught. Each time, Ethan had been there with a soft apology, a warm hand on my back, a reminder that I should be more careful. Then, 2 months ago, I had collapsed after drinking tea at Victoria's house. I spent hours in urgent care, my body racked with tremors and nausea. The doctors never found anything conclusive, but I knew. I knew. I also knew that Victoria had made that tea herself. And she had sat there, across from me, watching with that same amused smirk she wore now. The pieces had been falling into place for months. The hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room. The lingering glances between Ethan and Victoria. The way his phone lit up with messages at odd hours, messages I wasn't supposed to see. This wasn't just about me. They had been planning something together. And today, they had placed it right in front of me. I exhaled softly, setting the cup down with deliberate care. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my movements smooth, unbothered. If they were watching me, I would watch them too. Then, an idea formed. A test. A simple switch. I reached for my phone, pretending to check a notification. Oh, 1 second. I need to take a quick call for work. I stood up, moving away from the table, stepping around Victoria's seat. As I passed by her, I stumbled, just slightly, knocking the table, making a small commotion. Oh. Sorry about that. I gasped, steadying myself. Victoria's cup wobbled. My hand moved fast, too fast for her to notice. When I straightened up, my coffee was no longer in front of me. It was in front of Victoria. Victoria barely reacted, too absorbed in whatever game she thought she was winning. She adjusted the napkin on her lap, lifting her cup with the same casual elegance she always carried. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to keep my expression neutral as she brought the rim to her lips. Ethan was still watching me, expecting me to return to my seat and drink. But I didn't. I lingered near the window, phone in hand, pretending to scroll while keeping my focus razor-sharp on Victoria. The first sip was small. Barely a taste. She let the coffee sit on her tongue for a moment before swallowing. Then, something changed. It was subtle at first, a flicker of hesitation, her fingers tightening around the porcelain, the barest shift in her expression. My pulse quickened. She set the cup down slowly, blinking twice. A pause. Too long of a pause. Ethan noticed. Something wrong? He tried to keep his tone light, but I heard it, the undercurrent of panic, the realization creeping in. Victoria exhaled sharply, shaking her head as if clearing a fog. No, it's a little strong, that's all. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a thin crack in the polished surface. I turned back toward the table, tilting my head. Oh? You usually like your coffee bold. I moved closer, watching as she lifted the cup again. This time, her hand wasn't as steady. Another sip. Then, a sharp inhale. She pressed a palm against her stomach, her jaw tightening. Ethan sat up straighter. Victoria? His voice dropped, no longer casual. She tried to speak, but a strange sound came out instead, something between a cough and a gasp. Her breath hitched. A tremor ran through her hand as she set the cup down with too much force, some of the liquid sloshing over the side. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm, unreadable. I wanted her to say it. I needed her to admit it. Something feels off, she muttered, blinking rapidly. She reached for her napkin, dabbing at her lips, but I saw the tremble in her fingers now, the tension in her shoulders. Ethan's chair scraped against the floor as he shot up. Victoria, what's going on? He glanced at me, then at her cup. I watched the exact moment the realization hit him, when he put it all together. Panic settled into his features. His gaze snapped back to me, searching for confirmation, for any sign that I had figured it out. I held his stare, letting the silence stretch between us before speaking. That wasn't my cup, I said softly. His face drained of color. Victoria let out a sharp breath, gripping the edge of the table. Ethan. Her voice was barely above a whisper now, strained, uncertain, but laced with something new, fear. Ethan turned back to her, eyes wide, hands twitching at his sides. That wasn't supposed to be yours, he muttered, almost to himself. But the words hung in the air like a death sentence. The room went still. The only sound was Victoria's unsteady breathing, the faint clink of her spoon against the saucer as her trembling hand knocked against it. The perfect illusion they had crafted was shattering right in front of them. My pulse steadied, my grip tightening around my phone. I had what I needed. Now, it was time to finish this. Ethan lunged toward Victoria, his movements frantic as he crouched beside her chair. Just breathe, okay? You're fine. But she wasn't fine. Her pupils had dilated, her skin was paling by the second, and a thin sheen of sweat formed along her brow. Her fingers dug into the tablecloth, gripping it like an anchor. What did you put in it? Her voice was hoarse, each word a struggle. I stayed where I was, watching it all unfold. Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. He was too busy calculating his next move, too busy realizing that his plan had collapsed right in front of him. I pulled my phone from my pocket and pressed the record button. You should tell her, Ethan, I said, my voice almost gentle. Tell her what was in my cup. The one she just drank. His head snapped up, eyes wild. Evelyn, this isn't what you think. No? I stepped forward, resting my hand on the back of an empty chair. Then explain it to me. Explain why Victoria is having the same symptoms I had 2 months ago, after drinking tea at her house. Or why I ended up in urgent care 3 times this year after sharing meals with you too. My voice hardened. Explain that. Victoria coughed, a choked sound escaping her throat. She clutched her stomach, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She wasn't trying to mask her fear anymore. Her body was betraying her, just as she had planned for mine to. I watched as the truth settled in, the horror, the betrayal. Her gaze shifted to Ethan, her lips parting. You, she whispered, something breaking in her expression. You told me it wouldn't. He clamped a hand over hers, gripping it tightly. Stop talking, he hissed under his breath. We just need to. I dialed 911. Ethan's head snapped toward me as the call connected. 911, what's your emergency? My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction to something in her coffee, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos unraveling before me. She's conscious, but experiencing tremors and difficulty breathing. We're at 1542 West Monroe, Penthouse 3. Victoria's breathing hitched. Ethan's grip on her tightened, his knuckles turning white. His mind was working, I could see it. He was trying to find an escape route, a way to twist this in his favor. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. Victoria groaned, her body slumping slightly. Ethan, she rasped. Tell me, what was in it? Ethan swallowed hard. His silence was damning. I lifted my phone higher, ensuring the screen was facing him. I'm still recording, I reminded him. So go ahead, explain. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He knew there was nothing to say. Nothing that could undo this. The sirens blared in the distance, growing closer. Help was on the way, but not for him. Not for them. Ethan's world, the careful, calculated life he had built, was crumbling. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to relief. The sirens grew louder, the sharp wail slicing through the suffocating tension in the room. Ethan's face was pale now, beads of sweat forming along his hairline. His grip on Victoria slackened just as her body trembled again, her breathing turning more erratic. She tried to lift a hand toward him, as if seeking reassurance, but he didn't reach back. He was too busy unraveling. I stepped closer, keeping my phone steady. Tell me, Ethan, I said, my voice calm, deliberate. How were you planning to explain this? If I had been the one to drink that coffee instead of her, what was your plan? He turned to me then, something shifting behind his eyes, something darker. For a split second, I saw it. The calculation. The survival instinct kicking in. But before he could piece together whatever lie he was scrambling for, Victoria let out a sharp, pained gasp. You said it, would just make her sick, she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand gripped Ethan's sleeve weakly. You said, it wouldn't be traced. My breath caught. There it was. The confession I had been waiting for. Ethan flinched, his head whipping toward her. Victoria, stop talking, he snapped, his voice low but edged with panic. She ignored him, her glazed eyes locking onto mine instead. The tea, she muttered, her words slurred. The breakfast, the last time. It was all him. I felt my stomach drop. I had suspected Victoria had been in on it from the start. But now, as I watched the realization dawn in her eyes, I saw something else. She had been manipulated too. I gripped my phone tighter. And what about this time? I asked softly. Was it him again? Her lips parted, but she never got the chance to answer. The front door burst open. 2 paramedics rushed in, followed closely by a pair of uniformed officers. One of them, a tall woman with sharp eyes, scanned the room quickly before focusing on Victoria's slumped form. "We need space," one of the paramedics instructed, already kneeling beside her. I stepped back, keeping my phone recording. Ethan, however, didn't move. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his eyes darting toward the officers like a cornered animal. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a clipped tone, turned to me. "You were the caller?" I nodded. "I have everything recorded." She drank from my cup. The coffee, there was something in it. He switched them before I could drink. I jerked my chin toward Ethan. "And she just admitted that he's been drugging me for months." The officer's jaw tightened. His gaze flickered toward Ethan. "Sir, I need you to step away." Ethan moved. Fast. I barely had time to react before he lunged toward me, his hand reaching for my phone. But the officers were faster. One grabbed him by the arm, yanking him backward as he struggled. "Evelyn," he shouted, his voice wild now, desperate. "You don't understand. She was the one who—" He didn't get to finish. The officer forced him down, pinning his arms behind his back as the cuffs clicked into place. Victoria let out a weak laugh, her lips curling into something bitter. "Look at you," she rasped. "You really thought you'd get away with it." Ethan thrashed once more, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But he wasn't looking at Victoria anymore. He was looking at me. And for the first time since this all started, I saw something real in his eyes. Fear. Ethan's struggles grew weaker as the officers secured the cuffs around his wrists. The panic in his eyes was raw now, stripped of the calculated charm he had worn for years. He wasn't in control anymore. He knew it. I knew it. Victoria let out a ragged breath, her body barely holding itself upright as the paramedics worked around her. She was still conscious, but barely. Her fingers twitched slightly on the table, her skin pale and clammy. Despite the fear in her expression, there was something else flickering beneath it, realization. She had never thought she would be the one gasping for breath. I shifted my attention to Ethan. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, his lips slightly parted as if he was still trying to come up with a way out of this. "You really thought I wouldn't notice, didn't you?" I said quietly, stepping closer. "All those times you made excuses. All those nights I was curled up in pain, and you convinced me it was just bad luck." I shook my head, my grip tightening around my phone. "You almost had me believing it." His nostrils flared. "Evelyn, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I held up the phone, the red recording light still blinking. "Victoria might not have realized what you were capable of until it was too late, but I did. I've known for a while." The female officer who had been standing to the side stepped forward then, her expression unreadable. "Ma'am, would you be willing to provide a formal statement?" I exhaled slowly, nodding. "Yes." Ethan jerked in the officer's grip. "She's lying. She set this up." His voice cracked with desperation. "Victoria, tell them." Victoria didn't respond. She was too busy clenching her jaw against another wave of nausea, her body too weak to even glare at him. The paramedics exchanged glances before one of them addressed the officers. "She needs to be transported now. Whatever she ingested, it's spreading fast." Ethan's expression twisted. "You can fix this," he urged her. "Tell them I had nothing to do with it. Tell them it was her." Victoria finally turned her head, her heavy-lidded eyes landing on him. For the first time since she had started feeling the effects of the poisoned coffee, she actually looked at him, really looked at him. And then she laughed. It was weak, barely more than an exhale, but it was filled with something bitter. "Fix this," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "You're the one who promised it wouldn't be traced, Ethan." She blinked sluggishly. "You're the one who said it was just supposed to make her sick." Silence. The officers exchanged glances, their grips on Ethan tightening. There it was. The final nail in his coffin. Victoria's breathing was unsteady, but her lips curled just slightly as she muttered, "You poisoned me." Ethan's face drained of color completely. "Victoria," he whispered, but there was nothing left to say. She let her head tilt back slightly against the chair, her body giving in to exhaustion. The paramedics loaded her onto the stretcher, her eyes fluttering closed. She didn't look at him again. I stepped back, watching as they wheeled her toward the door. The entire room felt smaller, suffocating, but I refused to let the weight of it crush me. One of the officers tapped his radio. "We'll need a forensic team to test the coffee and collect evidence at the scene." He looked at me then. "We'll also need to take your phone as evidence." "The recording?" "I already sent a copy to my lawyer." My voice was steady, firm. Ethan flinched. The officer nodded approvingly. "Smart." Ethan let out a strangled sound. "You're ruining everything." I tilted my head, watching him. "No, Ethan. You did that all on your own." The officers led him toward the door. He thrashed once more, but it was weaker now, useless. He turned his head at the last second, eyes burning with something ugly. "You think this is over?" he hissed. I stared at him, unblinking. "Oh, it is," I said. And then they took him away. The moment the door shut behind them, the silence in the penthouse was deafening. I stood there, inhaling slowly, letting the weight of everything settle. It was over. The months of paranoia, the nights spent wondering if I was imagining things, the careful calculations to uncover the truth, it was all over. I glanced down at the untouched coffee cup still sitting in front of me, its surface now cool, harmless. It could have been me. It was supposed to be me. I exhaled, dragging my fingers through my hair before making my way toward the window. The city stretched before me, golden light spilling between the skyscrapers. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. A soft chime pulled me back to the moment. My phone. I glanced at the screen, a message from my lawyer. "The files are secure. We'll proceed with formal charges." "I assume you're pressing them against both?" I hesitated, just for a second. Victoria had been a willing participant in everything leading up to today. She had manipulated, schemed, played her part in every attempt to destroy me. But in the end, she had been just as disposable to Ethan as I was. I typed my response. "Yes. Both." There was no hesitation this time. I turned away from the window, stepping over to the table. My fingers traced the edge of Victoria's abandoned coffee cup before I carefully lifted it and placed it in the sink. I wasn't about to leave behind any evidence that could be twisted into something against me. Not that I needed to worry, the truth was already out. A knock at the door startled me slightly. When I opened it, a uniformed officer was standing there, his expression professional but firm. "Miss Carter, we'll need you to come down to the station for an official statement. This won't take long, but given the severity of the case, the detectives will want to speak with you personally." I nodded. "Of course. Let me grab my coat." As I slipped on my jacket, my gaze flickered once more to the table, to the two coffee cups, one empty, one nearly full. The evidence of their downfall. I stepped outside, locking the penthouse behind me. There was still more to be done. Statements to give. Trials to attend. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one being hunted. I was walking away. And I was winning. The ride to the station was quiet. The officer driving didn't speak much, which suited me just fine. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. My mind was already working through what came next, the formal statement, the legal proceedings, the inevitable media storm that would follow once the truth got out. Ethan and Victoria weren't just going to prison. They were about to lose everything. When we arrived, I was escorted into a private room where a detective was already waiting. Detective Mendoza, according to her badge. She was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, and had the air of someone who had seen far too many cases like this. She gestured for me to sit. "Miss Carter, I appreciate you coming in so quickly," she said, flipping open a file. "Let's start with what you know." I leaned back slightly, meeting her gaze head-on. "I know that my husband has been poisoning me for months. I know that my sister-in-law helped him. And I know that today, they plan to do it again, only this time, they made a mistake." Mendoza's brows lifted slightly. "A mistake?" I folded my hands in my lap. Victoria drank the wrong cup. She let out a low whistle, jotting something down. "And you have proof of this?" I pulled out my phone, placing it on the table. Recorded conversation. Video. Messages I forwarded to my lawyer. Medical records from past incidents. Mendoza looked impressed but not surprised. "Smart," she murmured. "Most people in situations like this don't think that far ahead." I let out a dry laugh. "Most people don't expect their own husband to try and kill them." She nodded, flipping through the notes in front of her. "Forensics is already analyzing the coffee. If the toxicology report matches what we suspect, your husband will be facing attempted murder charges. Your sister-in-law as well, depending on her level of involvement." "She was involved," I said firmly. "But Ethan was the mastermind." Mendoza leaned forward slightly. "Why do you think he did it?" I exhaled. "Money. Power. Control." My jaw tightened. Ethan always hated that I was the more successful one. My company was thriving, and his career had stalled. Victoria wanted me out of the way because we worked in the same industry, competing for the same clients. Together, they figured out a solution that worked for both of them. Mendoza clicked her pen, nodding slowly. "But they got greedy. And sloppy." "They underestimated me," I corrected. She studied me for a long moment, then closed the file. "I'll be honest, Miss Carter. Most people in your position wouldn't have made it this far. They would have ignored the signs, given in to fear, or ended up exactly where Ethan wanted them to." I held her gaze, my voice steady. "I don't scare easily." A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Good. That's going to serve you well in the trial." She stood, extending a hand. "We'll be in touch once the official charges are filed. In the meantime, if you need anything, security, legal support, let us know. Given the nature of this case, you're going to be under a lot of scrutiny." I shook her hand. "I can handle it." And I meant it. As I walked out of the station, stepping into the crisp evening air, I knew one thing for certain: Ethan and Victoria had played their game well. But I had played it better. And now, I was the one walking free. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back, their cameras flashing as Ethan and Victoria were let in, both wearing the same prison-issued jumpsuits. It was a stark contrast to the polished, powerful image they had once cultivated. Ethan looked thinner, his jaw clenched as he avoided my gaze. Victoria, on the other hand, was barely holding herself together. I sat in the front row, my lawyer beside me, hands folded neatly in my lap. I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to watch them fall. The prosecution wasted no time laying out the evidence. "Your Honor, what we have here is a premeditated and calculated attempt at poisoning Mrs. Carter, spanning months." The prosecutor clicked through slides on the overhead screen. "Medical records indicate she was hospitalized 3 separate times under suspicious circumstances, each time after consuming food or drink prepared by the defendants." I watched as security footage from Victoria's penthouse played on the screen. The moment I swapped the cups, Victoria unknowingly drinking what was meant for me. Ethan tensed in his seat, his hands curling into fists. Then, the prosecutor played the audio recording from that day. You said it would just make her sick. You said it wouldn't be traced. Victoria's voice, clear as day, rang through the silent courtroom. The jury was watching her now, their expressions unreadable. But she felt it. She knew what they were thinking. Her head snapped toward Ethan. For the first time, real hatred burned in her gaze. You son of a, she hissed under her breath, but her lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering something urgent. She exhaled sharply, shifting in her seat. That's when it happened. Victoria flipped. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have something to say. Her lawyer paled. Ethan stiffened. I was manipulated, she continued, her voice quivering just enough to sound believable. Ethan told me that it was harmless, that it would just make Evelyn too sick to attend an important work meeting. She blinked, her face twisted with rehearsed regret. I never would have agreed if I knew it was poison. I almost laughed. She was trying to save herself. The prosecutor didn't look surprised. Miss Carter, you knowingly participated in a scheme that resulted in multiple hospitalizations and nearly caused the death of your own sister-in-law. Whether you were misled or not, you played a role in this crime. Victoria opened her mouth, as if to protest, but the judge cut her off. Enough. We've heard the evidence. Ethan shot her a murderous glare. His betrayal was evident. He had expected her to go down with him, to remain silent. But she wasn't willing to sacrifice herself for him. Not anymore. The judge turned to the jury. Have you reached a verdict? A woman in the front row, the jury foreperson, stood. Yes, Your Honor. The room held its breath. For the defendant, Ethan Carter, we find him guilty on all counts. Ethan closed his eyes, his jaw locked in fury. For the defendant, Victoria Sinclair, we find her guilty of conspiracy and attempted poisoning. Victoria let out a shuddering breath, slumping slightly in her seat. She had hoped for leniency. She didn't get it. The judge's voice rang clear. Ethan Carter, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Ethan's head snapped up. His mask of calm finally shattered. What? Victoria Sinclair, the judge continued, you are sentenced to 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10. Victoria let out a soft, broken sound, half sob, half disbelief. Ethan twisted in his seat, his eyes burning into her. You did this, he seethed. She ignored him, staring blankly at the table in front of her. I watched them, feeling nothing but satisfaction. The officers moved in, placing Ethan and Victoria in cuffs. As they were escorted past me, Ethan suddenly lunged forward, his eyes wild. This isn't over, Evelyn, he spat. A guard yanked him back, shoving him forward. I met his furious gaze with a cold, steady one. Oh, Ethan, I murmured, just loud enough for him to hear. It's over for you. He didn't get the last word. I did. 1 year later, I stood in the executive boardroom of Henderson & Co., the very company Victoria had once tried to steal from me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had just signed a multi-million-dollar contract, one that cemented my company's dominance in the industry. I glanced at my reflection in the sleek glass windows, remembering the woman I had been a year ago. The woman who had once trusted Ethan. The woman who had ignored the signs. The woman they had tried to destroy. She no longer existed. A soft chime from my phone pulled me back to the present. A news alert flashed across the screen. Ethan Carter and Victoria Sinclair begin their prison sentences. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. Instead, I picked up the coffee mug on my desk, hot, rich, completely safe. I took a slow, satisfying sip, letting the warmth spread through me. Ethan and Victoria had lost everything, their freedom, their wealth, their power. And me? I had one. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about moving forward and never looking back.